Okay, I got cut off because my phone rang and it cut my video off. But anyway, taking on with that story, that was the first day I realized that Miss Brown was really a nice teacher. And she just babied me that day. Going back, the house we lived in prior to that was a house right across from before the Burn house, before we moved into there. And it was after the Brown house. But I think we lived with Aunt Juanita sometime in that time. Because I remember a Christmas that at Aunt Juanita's house when we lived with them, we slept everywhere, and Mom and Dad slept in the cellar, which was a dirt cellar. They kept potatoes and canned stuff. I mean, parents canned stuff back then. We really literally ate off the land. We canned everything. Canned all kinds of stuff. Kept potatoes, kept apples in the cellar. Because it was cool and dark down there, and it kept them fresher. But Mom and Dad slept in the cellar, and I remember that Christmas, Mom didn't have any money, and all of a sudden Mom and them found out that they could get some toys from somewhere. I remember that, and I remember them going and getting them. And so when we opened presents that week or that next day or whenever it was, I don't know what the time frame was, I remember getting this. It was homemade. It was a little blue, and I think it had white little stars and moons on it, but it was just a little, maybe smaller than 12 inches, all around, little blue thing that somebody had sewn, and it had two little pockets, and inside the pockets was two little babies, two little plastic naked babies. And I remember getting that year, and that was my favorite toy that year. I also remember we used to get Uncle Carol and Aunt Juanita, and I don't know who all pitched in to get them, but we used to get stockings of hard candies, butterscotch candies and cinnamon disc and other stuff in there, each a little pre-made store stocking. And I remember that year I was playing with my little dollies in the blue thing on Aunt Juanita and Uncle Carol's bed in the middle of the hallway across from their bathroom, and my dollies were laying there, and I had put a butterscotch in my mouth, and I swallowed it, and it got stuck, and I was choking. And one of the other kids came by. I think it was Daniel. I can't remember which kid it was. Anyway, they went and told the adults, and all the adults ran in there, and they couldn't get me unchoked. I couldn't breathe. I remember that vividly, and I remember them hitting me on the back, and I remember Uncle Carol picking me up, and he held a leg in each hand and literally put my head and my neck between my legs and just beat on my back. And the butterscotch never came up, but evidently it went down, but my throat was so sore and I felt like something was still stuck in there. So that was the day I had my first cup of coffee. So Aunt Juanita and Mom fixed me a cup of coffee with creamer and sugar, and I got to sip on that coffee to help my throat and to make sure that disc really went all the way down. But it did go down because I could breathe again, but it just felt sore because of it being in there. But there was that house. From there we moved into the burnt house. But at the house that burned, oh my gosh, we did so much fun stuff there. And I know that Danny I'm sorry, I missed something. Let me go back before we moved in that. I remember Jerry coming home from Vietnam. I don't know which house it was. It may have been that yellow house that I was talking about with the turnaround drive, or it may have been a camp. I can't remember. I can't remember which house it was. All I remember is, or we may have been at Grandpa's. I don't know. I don't know where it was, but I do remember the house had a long gravel drive or dirt drive. And I remember Jerry walking down that drive with a box of fruit. And that was him coming home, but that's all I remember of that. Oh, I forgot about something when we lived in the camp. When we lived in the camp, I remember somebody had a crush on, well, I don't know if they had a crush on Rita, but they was trying to break into our cabin to get to Rita. And I remember us hiding behind this big wooden evidently it was a place in the kitchen to prepare food, but we was hiding behind those cabinets, and the person was banging on the door and screaming and yelling and trying to get to Rita. And he obviously didn't get in, but I don't know what happened. I don't know if somebody came and stopped him, but I do remember that. I also remember I was so hungry there, and I remember Danny, I think it was Danny, brought this huge basket of peaches, and they were huge peaches, and they were hairy all over. Of course, it's not hairy, but you know, the peach skin, you know, straight from the tree. I remember that. And then the house that we lived in prior to the burnt house was straight across from Lawton Elementary School. Across from Lawton Elementary School was a huge playground, and if you walked across that playground, then our house was right there. And we lived in that house for a while. And I remember one time that the stove caught on fire, the heating stove, not the cooking stove, and the firemen had to come out and they put salt on the fire, and that's the first time I learned that salt puts out fire. But we lived there for a little while, because I remember walking across the school to the school. And then, by the way, on that school playground was the first time, I must have been in first grade. I think I was in first grade. Kindergarten was a brown house. This was first grade in that house. And anyway, that was the first time that Tracy DeLabar, not Kathy, Tracy DeLabar. I think I said Kathy and the other one too. It's Tracy DeLabar. That lived in that neighborhood with us and did the Mickey Mouse cheer. That was Tracy. Anyway, I remember on that playground one day, Tracy DeLabar brought this little pamphlet to me, and she said, "Do you want to ask Jesus in your heart?" And I was in first grade, and you know, I sat with her and she talked to me, and she said, "Just say this little prayer with me," and she walked me through the Lord's Prayer, and I bowed my head and said it, and she said, now you have Jesus in your heart." And that was my first ever contact with God. And of course, you know, we didn't go to church. You know, our parents raised us believing in God, and that there was a God, and there was a heaven, and there was a hell. We were raised like that, but we didn't go to physical church. But we were raised good. Don't steal, obey your elders, respect the police. You know, we were raised like that. That was just normal makeup back then. You know, you respected authority. You respected your teachers. You didn't backtalk to them. You didn't argue with them. You didn't argue with other adults. You didn't backtalk other adults. That was just how we were raised. And but anyway, that was a house straight across from Lawton Elementary. From there, we moved to the burnt house, and we may have lived with Aunt Juanita again in between there somewhere, but the burnt house was my major memories. And I know that Danny on down lived out there, and then Danny was the first to leave, and then Elaine met Donnie, and I remember her bringing Donnie out there for a while, and the only memory I have of that is they sat on the couch against the window, and it was so dark, and there was curtains behind them, and that's all I remember of that. And then she ended up getting with Donnie. I think she was like 13 then, but anyway, they ended up getting together and getting married. Evelyn met Dave out there, and she used to go up with Debbie a lot to be around Dave. And I remember going up there a few times to Aunt Marie's house. And they moved out, and then so it was Karen on down, and then Karen had Stephen, and then she ended up getting with Jim and moving out, and so it was only Phil on down. That's why I refer to us five kids, because most of our memories were of us 5 kids out there. Were there bad memories out there? Yes, there were. I'm not focusing on those. I'm not focusing on any of those. We've got, I can't stress enough, we have got to learn to forgive, because if we do not forgive, you will not live a peaceful, good life. You can't hang on to the past. You can't do it. And it's easy to play a victim and try to hang on to all of that, but you have got to forgive. And that's just, forgiving is not for the person. It's not for the person saying it's okay what they did. It's for you. It's for your heart to let go of all that bitterness and hate. And anyway, I refer to us 5 out there, and we did so much fun stuff out there. And there were these huge, the Nesbitts, the elder Nesbitts, let us live there free. We didn't pay any rent. He made an agreement with Mom that Phil and Harold would help in the barn, you know, and help with the corn fields and the harvest and stuff, and then we could live there rent free. And during that time, Dad and Mom split. Dad met Sue, and I'll cover some of that, but so it was just Mom and us kids, and Mom got a job at Viking, I want to say Viking Diecast, before working in Pawpaw. I think Viking Diecast was what it was called, because I remember John Patterson worked with her there. But anyway, which is really funny, because later on I would get in the same church that John Patterson goes to. So that's a God thing. But anyway, Mom worked there. She worked nights, so she works, she worked, it wasn't graveyard shift. She was there when we went to school in the morning, and then when we got home at night, she was gone. So I think she worked 3 to 11, I think, was her hours. She worked 3 to 11 because she wasn't there when we got home. I do believe that she worked a graveyard shift, which was overnight if you know, at some periods of our life. But anyway, I think her job mainly was 3 to 11, because I remember her, or 3 to midnight or something like that. But anyway, we did so much fun stuff out there. We did not have a phone. You hear me? We did not have a cell phone. We did not have a landline. We had no contact with the outside world. We were the only ones that lived on that road, and it was a dirt road. There was one house at the very end and one house between the middle and the end, but it was quite a ways away. And so when we needed anything or needed to get in touch with Mom, we had to run down to that house that was in the middle of that dirt road and have them call out to try to get in touch with Mom at the plant, which wasn't very often. We didn't do that. Only one time when the house burned. But we did so much out there. Of course, we played cowboys and Indians with stick guns, and we had huge dirt cities because we had matchbox cars, and I don't even know how we got them. I think they came free in cereals and stuff like that. And we actually made big, huge dirt cities. You know, we would build roads in little towns, and we played in that for hours outside. Hours. We also weren't supposed to do this, but Phil and Harold would take hay from the barn and build up, just put big piles of hay at the side of the house. So when Mom went to work on the at night, when she left at 3, we would climb up onto the house and jump into those bales of hay, into those big piles of hay. Yes, we were stupid, but it was fun. And then sometimes we did it, and Mom would just have to go into town and then come back. And when she did that, then one of us, we were all on top, you hear me? On top of the house, all 5 of us. And I was 11 or younger. And anyway, one of us would look out and watch for Mom's car way down the road, and when we saw her coming, we'd yell, "Mom's coming." So then we'd get down the house, and Mom would ask us, "Have you kids been on top of that house?" And we'd say, "No." But Mom wasn't stupid. She saw the pile of hay. What were we thinking? Anyway, um, we did that, and then of course, we played in the barn. There was so much stuff in the bottom of that barn to play in. We played in the cornfields. We ran through the cornfields, and then we used to just explore the property. We would go through the cornfields all the way to the back, and there were these blackberry bushes, and we would pick all of those, and they were so good. But one time going back there, we were walking back there, and Phil was the lead, and all of a sudden he froze, and he told us all just to freeze. And listen, when I tell you that we listened back then, we did. So we all just froze in our tracks, and there was this huge, I'm not exaggerating, a huge rattlesnake, and it stood straight up on end with its tail on the ground rattling, and it was looking straight at us. It wasn't curled up, it was standing up, and its head, I mean, it was like, you know, its head was looking at us like this, and its tongue coming out, and its little tail was rattling, and Phil just said, just freeze, and we froze, and we looked at that snake. I don't know how long we stood there looking at that snake, scared to death. And Phil finally said, let's just back up. So we all started backing up slowly, and the snake just kind of went down on the ground and crawled away. And so many times God kept his hand on us. So many times, I can't even tell you. And anyway, there were these big corn bins out there. And of course they were empty until corn was harvested. But when the corn was harvested, they were filled completely to the top. So they were slats. So we used to climb up the slats, and there were 3 openings in the top, and we would take those openings off and stand on the corn and play war with our guns and stuff against each other in those 3 holes, just shooting at each other, fake shooting, you know, with the fake guns, stick guns. We didn't even have toy guns. We were poor. So we had stick guns that we made out of sticks. And I'm outside. It's gorgeous out today. I just love this. I'm in my little tree fort. But we did that, and then I remember Dad used to take, before Mom and Dad split up, he used to take, get the old corn. It was really too old to eat or cook or boil or cook or anything, and he used to pick it off of there, and it felt hard, and he used to fry it in a pan with salt and pepper. And now today they have corn nuts. So I mean, and that's really what he made back then, way back then in the 70s and early 70s, late 60s. And I remember at that house, I'm trying to remember everything. Dad met Sue out there, but Dad used to go. Some of the memories. Dad drank when he was younger, so he was an alcoholic. So that, when I say there were bad memories, that's some of the bad memories. But I'm not touching that. But he played music at the bars, and on the weekends usually. And Mom didn't go with him that often because she stayed with us. But there were a few times she did go, and then she stopped going with him because she didn't want to leave us kids. And anyway, he met Sue at those bars, and then they ended up getting together later, and Mom and Dad divorced, and I used to go up to Dad's on the weekend with Dad and Sue, and I met Rhonda and Dee there, and probably a 2-year period, you know, that I went up there before I got in church, and we did so much fun stuff up there, but stuff that, my God, if Kyla did any of this, I would just die. But I was 12, 13, and we used to walk. It was 2 miles into town one way. So me and Rhonda used to walk into town those 2 miles. And of course I wore little Daisy Duke shorts and little halter tops made out of bandanas. Yes, I was that skinny one time. I was tiny. And I had a good figure back then. And we used to count how many horn honks we got from walking into town and walking back. I don't know why we did that, but it was just something that was big for us. But we did so much fun stuff at Rhonda and Dee's, and we used to go to the playgrounds there in Comstock, and that's where I remember Rhonda meeting Brian, and that was one of her first boyfriends, and she wrote Brian on the toe of her sneakers, and instead of writing Brian, she wrote Brain, and that was a joke with us. So, and I met my first boyfriend there, had my first kiss there. His name was Mark Hunkins. He was blonde and he was good looking, and that was my first kiss of my life, and he was a good kisser. Well, for me being 13, I think I was 13, 12. And anyway, I used to go up there a lot, and then my mom didn't know half the stuff we were doing up there, but Joe and Anita and I used to go up there, and then she stopped Joe and Anita from going up there because I think they told on some of the stuff we did. But I, you know, me in my rebellious teenage years, I still went up there. So anyway, our house burned, and during that time when the house burned, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that happened at that house. So weird stuff. There was, I don't want to touch on all that, but there was literally a tombstone in the barn of a 9-year-old boy, and so much weird stuff happened in that house, and I'm not going to dwell on that, but oh my gosh, I don't know what all that was. I really don't know what all that was. I know they say houses can't be haunted, but I'm telling you, some weird stuff happened in that house on M40 that burned. But anyway, that was my prelude to church is coming up. But anyway, we were, one of the tiles, and it wasn't a ceramic tile, but it was a maybe a porous board tile that the ceiling was made of in the house that burnt, and one of the tiles fell out one night, and mom didn't have money. You know, she was going through the divorce with dad, and it kind of depressed her that tile fell out and she couldn't fix it, and you know, it broke on the floor when it fell. So that tile was out right above the stove, right above the heating stove. And one day, Harold stayed home because he didn't want to go to school this day, and he cleaned the whole house while we were at school that day, the whole house. And Mom had this suitcase of pictures, and it usually sat in a certain spot, but because Harold cleaned the house, he set it on this brown wooden dresser that we had, that had like a little hole, like not a hole, but a compartment without a door in the middle of the dresser, and then on either side of that hole was drawers, and then it had a mirror on it in one of the bedrooms. And Harold set that suitcase of pictures right there in that little cubby hole, but that's not usually where it's set. But anyway, he cleaned the whole house and cooked beans, pinto beans from scratch. Now we didn't cook microwave. We didn't have a microwave. We never had a microwave my growing up years, ever, even when I was older, even up until I got married, you know, to Larry. We didn't have a microwave. We actually cooked on a physical stove, and everything we cooked was from scratch. It wasn't open a package and cook. We peeled potatoes and cut them up and fried them, seasoned them. We put beans, hard beans, in a pan with water and cooked them for hours, adding lard or grease and seasonings to that to get our pinto beans. We mixed cornmeal with the proper stuff, eggs, and I mean, everything we cooked was from scratch. And I think Tom's watching me, either Tom or a little dog. It's Tom. And anyway, Harold had cooked beans and potatoes and cornbread. So when we got home from school, all that was waiting there, and we sat down to watch our normal Gilligan's Island and Family Affair and same old reruns after school every day. And while we were sitting there eating, Phil, Harold, Joe, Anita, and me, Mom was at work, and it was the dead of winter, so we were snowed in. And when I said snowed in, nobody could get down our road. Plows didn't plow our road. We walked. Mom used to park her car at the end of the road and walk to the house, and then walk back to her car to go to work. That's how we lived, on that whole road. And it anyway, we were sitting there eating, and Anita looked up and she saw a little flicker of red right where that tile had fallen out. And she asked what it was. So Phil, of course, us kids, we explored everything. He went to open the door to the upstairs, because there were 2 rooms upstairs. There were 2 rooms upstairs that the boys slept in, and then there was 2 bedrooms downstairs with a nice living area with a small kitchen, and then there was a bigger, like it probably would have been a living area, but Mom made that her and Dad's bedroom with their bed in it. That's where Dad used to play music, in that room too. And Anita saw that and saw that little flicker, so Phil went to open the upstairs door, and when he did, flames just flew down. So the whole upstairs was already on fire while we were sitting there eating. No smoke, no nothing. So Phil ran outside, and there were flames all on the top of the house, and he yelled at us to get out, and Phil kept running back in there, and I'm like, stop. I was screaming at him, probably crying too, but screaming at him, don't go back in there, don't go back in there. And of course, you can't think during a time when the house is on fire, and he grabs the first thing he can grab, which was a basket of baby clothes that belonged to Karen and Steven, and he puts that outside, and then he goes back in and grabs his tuba, and he was going to go back in there, and I kept screaming at him, so he didn't. So we didn't get Mom's pictures. We just weren't thinking, and everything burned. I mean, it burned to the ground. So we all ran down to the neighbor's house. Anita didn't have shoes on. She just had socks, and this was dead of winter. We didn't have coats on. We were just running down to the neighbor's house, and Anita, I remember Anita being so mad at the devil, and she was yelling at the devil. And we ran to the neighbor's house, and of course they gave us coats, and whoever didn't have stuff on their feet, they gave us stuff to put on their feet, and they called Mom. And Mom came out, and the fire trucks were out. They called the fire trucks too, and the fire trucks were out there, but they couldn't get down the road because it was snowed in. Nobody could get down. So they were all parked at the end. They wouldn't let Mom come down. And at this point, we were already at Rita's house because we had went out the other end of the road. And Mom just kept screaming at them that my kids are down there. My kids are down there. I don't know if my kids are okay. And Mom froze her hands at that time, trying to get down to us. They finally let her come down, but we were already at Rita's. And so we lived with Rita and Jimmy on Bitely Street for a little bit during that time. And I'm just touching a few memories that I remember. And lived there at Bitely, and I was in 7th grade, because I remember Pam, Jimmy Crouch's sister, gave me some clothes to wear, so I wore some of her clothes to school the next day. And everybody at the middle school, Lawton Middle School, were bringing stuff for us and leaving it in the office and making announcements, and I was so embarrassed because it was all about us and me, and I was just embarrassed. I didn't like to be called out or anybody pay attention to me, and everybody kept asking questions, all my school friends, and I was just embarrassed. So I went to the office crying, and they let me go home. And during that time, that's when Mom got the trailer, bought the trailer from, oh Lord, I can see their faces, but I can't see their names. But she bought the trailer that's in Lawton. And so us 5 kids and Mom moved into the trailer, and we were so excited because we had something brand new, and we never had anything new. You know, we were not picky. You know, the way we grew up, we didn't get store-bought bought clothes all the time. You know, we got hand-me-downs, and we didn't care. We were happy with whatever we got. We were satisfied. We didn't wear $100 shoes or get fancy haircuts, or we just grew up poor, you know, and I'm thankful for that. I really am, because I think all of us 11 kids grew up very well, You know, we work hard for what we get. We all work. You know, we don't, it's just a respect thing. We were raised with respect, and we weren't rich.